昨天收到你的来信，得知你在旅途中生病了，我的心里十分担心，没能在你的身边照顾你，只能祈求你在外面平安无事。父母的身体都挺好的，二弟和三弟已经到岭南上学了，小女儿学会说话了，你托人带给她的玩物、衣服、鞋子，她十分喜欢。父母很想念你，上次他们托我叠寄的那2封信，不知道你收到了没有？你要是收到了，希望你能。
This is a letter written 70 years ago from Kaiping in Guangdong province to a family member in the United States. Here in the local museum, there are several hundred such family correspondences. Most of the authors of these letters have passed away, leaving the letters themselves to tell their tales of separation. While China was plagued by wars, several generations left their homes for foreign countries, where they worked to make a better life for their families. After many years of hard work, and often much suffering and loneliness, only some of them achieved what they'd dreamed of. With the money they sent back to their families, here in the heart of China's countryside, an architectural wonder was created. This is a village in Kaiping, Guangdong province. The village has all the characteristics of a typical South China village. It has brilliant sunshine, bamboo groves, a river, paddy fields, and a very peaceful atmosphere. But something quite extraordinary can also be found here. Something that is particular to this region's history. In the late Ming dynasty, China was riven by conflict. Society was in turmoil. Kaiping, along with 3 other neighbouring counties known as the Four Counties, all suffered from problems of civil strife and lawlessness. Migrants who came here from the Central Plains had to contend not only with frequent typhoons and floods, but also with attacks by local bandits. What these people needed was a place of safety, a place that would offer protection from these dangers. During the reign of Emperor Jia of the Ming dynasty, something remarkable took place in one of the villages here, something that would change the lives of every member of the local people. Yinglong Tower was built. These fortified towers, known as Diaolou, acted as both a shelter and a fortress. Yinglong Tower faces south and has 3 floors. It occupies an area of 152 square meters. At each corner of Yinglong Tower, there's a watchtower. The watchtowers are simple in design, but very solidly built. Yinglong Tower is in fact the oldest Diaolou in this area, and it's protected generations of locals from the heavy floods of the typhoon season. To the villagers, the tower has been a lifesaver.
我们乘坐围船，航程从3、4个月至半年没有一定，快慢要靠天气。在船上，我们自携咸虾酱佐膳，日久都生了虫。抵岸时胡子几寸长，眼深面黑。海洋上浪大如山，许多人熬不过风浪，抱着桅杆从香港 一直哭到旧金山，等到平安上岸，恍如隔世了。
In the mid-19th century, there was a gold rush in California, and following this, there was the building of the Pacific Railway. Throughout the 4 counties, hiring notices for Chinese laborers were posted. Upon reading the notices, many men bid farewell to their families and boarded ships sailing for America, where they hoped to find a better future for themselves and their loved ones. These men had a collective name: gold rushers.
到了美国，一切都不是想象中的样子。为了寻找黄金，我们长年累月地奔波在西部山区里。我们干的都是最危险的活儿：开采锡矿、开荒种植，穿行在修建铁路的狭窄山道上。
After several waves of migration, Chinese laborers began to settle in America and Canada. The money they earned through their hard labor, they sent home. By the early 20th century, the 4 counties had become famous for being the home of many Chinese migrants. Their money had created a better life for their families at home. With society in turmoil back home, this inflow of money quickly drew the attention of bandits. Kaiping had long suffered from outlaws, in fact, since ancient times. But during this period, the level of criminality in the region greatly worsened. Between 1912 and 1930, Kaiping recorded 71 cases of kidnapping. People returning home with money were easy targets. Robbed of everything they had worked hard for, some committed suicide. Clearly, there was an urgent need for a safe place where people could live in peace and security. These fortified towers began to appear in the early 20th century in Kaiping, within a vast region that covers over 1,600 square kilometers. The construction of most of the towers was funded by overseas Chinese who wanted to create a safe haven for themselves and their families from the attacks of local outlaws. It proved to be an effective response.
7月3日黄昏，匪徒们把村庄包围得水泄不通。夜里，他们几次突闸、挖墙，都被打退了。他们还在村外放火烧草堆，楼里的村民们用长枪、短枪一起开火，匪徒跌跌撞撞，不敢抬头。
Defensive in nature, most of the towers have 4 stories, but the highest have 9 levels. Some were left up. At each corner, there was a round or square fortress from which defenders could keep watch and take aim. One late afternoon in 1922, a dozen or more strangers were reported to be seen on the path leading to a local town. After darkness fell, these strangers executed a plan they had prepared long in advance. They kidnapped the students and the schoolmaster of the local school, which was attended by many children from wealthy families. On their way back to their hideout, however, the bandits were spotted by local sentries. Once the alarm was raised, the villagers pursued the group, the bandits fled, and the hostages were left behind.
"现在把全家都搬到美国是不明智的。不管怎样，美国并不是我们自己的家。这里虽然能够赚到钱，但是这儿中国人的地位很低。等我赚到足够多的钱，我就要回到中国，寻找发展的机会。"
Over time, the towers of Kaiping became more than just defensive in nature. The quality of the materials used and the comfort incorporated into them were also important factors in the plan. With the increase in funds from overseas, the towers became more complex and impressive in design. Some villages even had what was called a Diaolou villa. Diaolou villas combined both defensive and living needs, and their grand design signified social status. They also provided the best shelter and protection a family could ever hope to have. So, just who were the people who turned this dream of a safe community into a reality? Apart from a few Chinese and foreign architects, most of those involved in the building projects were local workers from the countryside. None of these local workmen had ever been abroad, but they were skilled craftsmen with imaginations. The plans they drew were a fusion of Chinese and Western architectural styles. They incorporated elements of local tradition. The end result was functional and uniquely beautiful. Through the efforts of these workmen, an architectural wonder occurred. These towers brought together the architectural forms of diverse cultural and historical periods from around the world in one unified structure. Among other features, they had the colonnades of ancient Greece, the arches of ancient Rome, Byzantine domes, Gothic pinnacles, and even Indian corridors. The 25-meter-tall Ruishi Tower in Kaiping is an example of a typical Diaolou tower. There are living quarters and bedrooms on each of the first 5 levels. Each floor is ornately decorated. The 6th floor is built in the classical Greek style with a colonnade of columns and arches. The 7th floor has a balcony and a domed corner pavilion. On its south and north sides is a pediment in Baroque style. The 8th floor also has a pavilion in the center. Another small domed pavilion on the top level is in classical Roman style. There are many such buildings that feature this fusion of Western and Chinese architectural styles. They show the extent to which foreign architecture was appreciated in these parts. This has become part of the unique fascination of the Kaiping Towers. In the vast area of Lingnan, there are many Diaolou. They're a feature of the landscape that's unique to this region. These buildings are truly a marvel in the history of architecture. Moreover, a century on, these buildings stand proud and strong. The fact is, many of the 1,883 Diaolou towers in Kaiping were built with reinforced concrete.
"母亲，自从分别之后，已经有2年了。由于战争的原因，使得我们母子不能相见。假若战事一停，我一定立刻回家，以报答母亲的养育之恩。"
Due to social upheavals in China and the global political situation of the 1940s, many of the Diaolous, which numbered more than 1,000 in total, were left abandoned. Inevitably, many of these amazing buildings fell into disrepair, and some were left to become ruins.
"一位神母说，这是她嫁到和安里后，第一次进入明石楼参观。她从地下上到天台，边走边看，大开眼界。她说，当年楼里的陈设都很雅致，家具都是酸木制作的，非常漂亮。"
Some towers were more simple in design. They were, after all, built with money pulled together by the villagers for just one purpose: to protect against bad. Was reserved for the worship of the ancestors. Most of these wealthy families had lived abroad. They preferred a life that combined both Chinese and Western styles. When it came to farming the land, they used traditional tools. It seemed strange that Eastern and Western civilizations met in this way, and such a happy marriage of two civilizations was not to be seen anywhere else. The men left home to make a living elsewhere. Due to the high cost of travel, some were never able to make the journey back, leaving their wives to spend the rest of their lives alone. To ease their homesickness, some of those who went abroad took their musical instruments with them. The only way they could communicate with their families on the other side of the world was by letter. This separation was, of course, painful, both for those who left and for those left behind. For those who lived overseas, the Diaolou symbolized their presence in spirit. The earliest villages in Kaiping appeared during the 14th century. These first buildings were designed in strict accordance with feng shui principles. However, these buildings also incorporated new features to suit the local terrain and to reflect wider aesthetic influences. The villagers and the Diaolou created a perfect symbiosis, and they also formed a landscape not found anywhere else in the world. Standing at a distance from a village, you first see the traditional dwellings, and behind them, the tall towers half shaded by bamboo groves. The towers are like sentries standing at the ready to provide safe shelter.
Lều hít lều hôn vui tràn ngàn hao thay bị tu thần thay tham han cu an yêu ca yak nan phan lu nim thân yen chiang po han na vi si yang yi Kinh sĩ nan.
The loss of generations of people through migration forms a large part of the local history here. For many who left never to return, Kaiping remained their home. For this reason, the Diaolou and the villages of Kaiping hold a very special place in modern Chinese history.